This time on Poll Hub, politics and pop culture have always had an uneasy coexistence, but recently, as politics has become a 24/7 part of American life, the relationship has shifted. Americans have strong opinions about singers, actors, and sports stars sharing political opinions, and we are looking at that. Then, the Americans with Disabilities Act passed in 1990, and a lot has improved for disabled people since. But when it comes to employment, there are still some big differences. We'll be looking at that, and finally, let's see just how superstitious we are. And hi everybody, welcome to Poll Hub. I'm JD Dapper.
I'm Barbara Carvalho. I'm Mary Griffith.
And I'm Lee Marengoff.
So we start with what's called pop in politics, but it also, with the World Cup just leaving, really has a lot to do with sports in politics too. And it was interesting, this segment came along, and one of the things that I talked to the producer about was that while it really is something that we're talking about a lot lately, this isn't necessarily a new thing. And I went back, Lee, to 1968, and I think we can go back further, but 1968 and the 3 track Olympians in Mexico City with the Black Power salute as being a really clear early example of politics and sports mixing. I'm wondering if you go back further, like Jesse Owens in 1936.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Yes, that was a time when Hitler was on the ascendancy, and with the attempt to demonstrate the power of and superiority of the Aryan race, that did not work as well as he had hoped because of Jesse Owens, among others, who competed in the 36 Olympics. And there have been other Olympic events, both tragic and political since.
Right.
Sure.
And it's not just sports. Whereas in the 60s, there were plenty of musicians, as an example, but also actors and actresses, largely around the Vietnam War or civil rights, took some very political stances. But it does seem like in this always-on political era that we're in, that there's a lot more attention paid to this than there might have been in the past. A few pieces of data from right now. A new political poll from this month finds roughly 60% of Americans say it feels like politics are everywhere these days where it does not make sense for things to be political. For instance, 52% of Trump voters say there are too much politics in sports. That's compared to 31% of Harris voters. Back in 2024, YouGov did some polling on celebrity influence and things. 11% said that celebrities have caused them to reconsider political issues. So is there an impact? Yeah, at least for 11%. 7% say they have supported a candidate because of a celebrity endorsement. Of course, we had Taylor Swift in 2024 making big waves, but Oprah, there's another example, and there's plenty of others. 51% in that poll said that celebrities' political views have caused them to think less of that celebrity. So that's the backlash. 32% believe speaking about politics generally hurts a celebrity's career, and only 10% think that it helps. There is some examples of tangible influence. Taylor Swift, mentioned her in 2024, endorsing Kamala Harris. Within 24 hours of the announcement, nearly 340,000 people had visited the voter registration website vote.gov using a custom link that was created and shared by Swift, so it could be measured. So there is this, politics being very present in our lives all the time now, sports and pop culture being very present in our lives right now. I'm just curious, and Mary, actually, I want to start with you. I'm very curious, why do you think that this is more talked about or more kind of on our minds now than it has been in the past when there have big incidents of it, but it doesn't seem like it carries through? What do you think's changed?
2 points here, Jake. One, I think it's because political issues are permeating both sports and pop culture more so than they have in the past, or it's being talked about more so and it's become more acceptable. I think that just in general, people are speaking more freely about their political views without fear of retribution, or if there is fear, not necessarily the lack of retribution or the lack of backlash, I should say, but that people just honestly, I don't think are caring so much about what that backlash is. I think people are speaking more freely in and of itself. And one thing that you did mention, Jay, is the impact on the celebrity or the athlete themselves. It becomes the question of, is it the cause? Is it the politician in the instances of celebrity or athlete endorsements that has more or less to gain than the issue or the candidate themselves?
Yeah, Barb, there's one thing that really struck me about this with the sports part of this. And there is some polling around this. Sienna did some polling back in April asking just about sports. 54% at that time said it is good for sports when athletes and coaches speak out on perceived social injustices. Only 26% said that it's bad for sports. In 2025, this was the year before, 57% said that professional sports did more to overcome racial discrimination in America. 17% said they did more to perpetuate it. And that Siena poll also found that Americans increasingly see sports as more than competition. They see it as, part of culture. Is that what's going on here? Is that sports and pop culture have become, along with politics, so that's all we are, in many ways as Americans, that it's almost inextricably linked? And how much of this has to do with Donald Trump? And I ask that thinking about the sports teams that win championships and then the players who don't want to go to the White House because it's Trump, or maybe because it's another president.
Well, I understand that. I think in a period of time where our shared experiences are few and far between, sports events, in fact, major sports events like the Super Bowl, like the Knicks coming from behind and being, this, Cinderella team winning the championship, like the final World Cup match. I think there are very few times where you have an event that has the national attention. Most of the time, we are kind of in our own little, silos, our social media silos, our media silos. And so I think that has moved us in a direction where it becomes very attractive for candidates to be part of those events, to raise their profile, to speak to their supporters. And when you mention President Trump, that's pretty much his MO. He gets booed at these events, but he's not speaking, to everyone. But it is a time where he can be present and he can speak very directly to, if not, all, certainly most of his supporters. So it's a time where everything has become so fragmented. And I think sports unifies us culturally. It certainly, unifies us in terms of interest. And I think it provides a very kind of unusual type of opportunity for both candidates, and celebrities and sports to be able to speak their mind to a very broad audience.
Lee, I'm reminded by this. I mentioned like Stanley Cup winners or Super Bowl winners going to the White House. I don't remember. Were there athletes that refused to go to the White House for Nixon or Reagan or Carter or any? I don't remember refusals until Trump, but I may just not be remembering correctly.
No, and nothing's jumping out at me either in terms of the refusals. I certainly understand why Trump might get that because he's so assertive on everything being political. I'm thinking back, you asked me about the Olympics, and then I'm thinking back, I think it was under the Coolidge administration that presidents started throwing out the first ball to start the baseball season. I'm not sure it was cool. I know FDR did, and that certainly became a merging of the two. And as someone whose two favorite things are politics and sports, I don't have a problem with the merging of the, obviously pick your side. So we can have Donald Trump dancing to YMCA or Proud to be an American at his rallies. I recall Hillary Clinton's song was, I believe, I'm a Woman, Hear Me Roar or something of that ilk. I don't remember the song totally, but that was there. And then I'm thinking the Kennedy Center recently with entertainers and all kinds of folks who were planning on appearing at the Kennedy Center.
Yeah, everybody canceled.
Yeah, and we canceled that
after the renaming. After the committee renamed it.
Well, the attending of the White House, with the president, that's part of it, but it's a much bigger part of it. I don't see why, if you don't like someone saying something, it's sort of like, anything else. They should not give up their First Amendment rights. And we can talk about, Kaepernick not kneeling. And some of it is very time bound. So I'm not sure if someone didn't kneel now, that would be such a big deal, but he was caught up in that. Similarly with the runners at the 68 Olympics, raising their Black Power fist.
Right.
Would that such a storm now? I doubt it.
Right. How much of it is time? How much of it is temporal to a moment in time like Colin Kaepernick or like that?
Yeah.
And how much of it is just sports and sports figures or pop figures speaking out? You mentioned that, and I think about the Academy Awards, which has always had a political element. And some of those things we would never remember. We'd have to go back and we'd bring them up, and everybody listening to this podcast would go, oh yeah, I forgot about that. But then Marlon Brando, if you're old enough, you definitely remember that. So I wonder how much of that is, temporal, tied to a specific thing that is also capturing the attention and divorced from the fact that it happens to be an actor or a pop singer or sports.
I think we're all sort of in agreement that this is sort of very pervasive and it's here to stay. And I'm not sure it's a bad thing. I don't have any problem with it. I can like or dislike someone based on who they seem to be singing or not singing. To Barb's point, though, I'm thinking of even at the Yankee Stadium after 9/11, the continuation of America the Beautiful, and also in the seventh inning, honoring a veteran from all the way back to, I guess, Vietnam. And, so obviously that's still, again, a unifying event where sports can be that. And it doesn't have to be the divisive, YMCA, and you think Trump looks silly or not silly because he's doing a lot of dancing, which some of the athletes in the World Cup in Spain were some either in jest or sarcastic, doing the Trump dance as he walked past and shaking their hands. It was kind of like a little double-edged there.
We turn now to the disability employment gap. More than 30 years have passed since the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law, yet people with disabilities still face challenges to employment. In 2025, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, people with disabilities accounted for a larger share of the unemployment rate compared with those without a disability, and the rate of education for people with disabilities vis-a-vis those without a disability really doesn't play into the equation here. So, Jay, you started with me. I'm going to start with you. What does the data tell us about why there is this gap when it comes to the employment of people with disabilities?
Yeah, I think what was really interesting in some of the data that was found here was asking questions about those who are disabled and asking questions of the employers. And what I was surprised by in looking through this data is the employers' concerns about hiring. And there's a lot of other data in here. I just jumped to that because this was from the U.S. Department of Labor's survey of employer policies in 2018. And they asked a series of questions to employers about what might your concerns be about hiring the disabled. And 86%, more than 86%, reported some concern, at least one concern. 59.4% cited the safety of workers with disabilities and their coworkers. 55%, 55.5%, questioned whether workers with disabilities could perform required job duties. 51.7% cited absenteeism. 45% cited the cost of accommodations. And 28% cited customer attitudes. I would say I applaud the employers for being honest here, because some of these are very touchy to say, I think you're concerned about your customers seeing somebody disabled and not wanting to shop. I think that's a touchy thing to acknowledge. Certainly this was not an in-person, poll, so they were answering questions in some sort of a survey that was anonymous. But I think that, to me, helps explain this, is that employers may still have quite a bit of ways to go to see disabled people as equal in their competencies or their capacities, I should say, as any other person that they might be interviewing.
Yeah, I'll jump in. My wife had spent as a social worker, an administrator in a program for around 40 years, which was the goal of which was the deinstitutionalization, following the famous Willowbrook Decree, that the need or desire to form group homes, bring people out of those, horrible places and integrate them into the community. The good news is that really worked to the betterment of lots and lots and lots of people and changed attitudes. And as people got more tolerant and were exposed to folks with different kinds of disabilities. The bad news is there was the not in my backyard. There was what's this home going to do for my property to value. I mean, there was that side of it. I'd be hard pressed to say anything other than it was a huge plus, taking folks out of those horror places and in many ways giving them a livelihood and more freedom, more value. And I think it's a matter of exposure, seeing that it's okay, and then it becomes more normalized. So, wheelchair accessibility. Well, that wasn't necessarily all the time, and now it is. And I don't think we think twice about it when we see that there's a need to have that for people with wheelchairs, for example.
Yeah, and I think in our present political debate, we're seeing, an erosion of some of these civil rights. I mean, it's done kind of right now in terms of people who, I think are much more marginalized. But as we erode those civil rights, whether it's for, sexual identity or sexual preferences, or whether it's for race or gender, I mean, when it comes to employment, there is a greater likelihood that people hire people that they feel connected with. Not only that they can, actually do the job, but that they want to sit across a desk from, or they feel that they have a lot in common. And so the idea of having many of these legislative rules is the fact that, which have been called, quotas or, now favoring certain classes of individuals over others. It's just to it's really to try to level the playing field and to allow an opportunity to show that people who are different and different in many, many ways are still as competent, as educated, and capable of doing a job. We're seeing a pretty significant reaction to that, particularly in the military, where basically a person of color or women are considered to have only been promoted not because of their talents or their abilities, but because of some sort of civil rights quota that was used in the military. And I think that that's a really dangerous place for this country to stand, because it's at certain points it's going to affect us all, either personally or, with someone we do know and care about.
Barb, Jay spoke to the challenges that employers perceive in hiring people with disabilities. But on the flip side, I would just want to bring up some data among recent college graduates who are unemployed and looking for work. And this comes from the Kessler Foundation. 37% of graduates with disabilities said that the employers assumed they could not do the job. That's one barrier that they've faced. 31% said that they experienced negative attitudes from employers, and 31% offered less pay than others in similar jobs. And my question, not just to you, Barb, but to the rest of the team here, is why are employers or potential employers not getting called out for this behavior?
Well, I think in many instances, they do get called out. In other words, someone does bring a case against an employer, but that's more likely to occur once a person is in a job, as opposed to, you don't really learn why you didn't get a job when you don't get a job. So you have all of those factors, again, that come into play in terms of why an employer does choose someone over someone else. And that's really tough to prove, and it's tough to verify. But the numbers certainly do speak to themselves. I did find it interesting when you mentioned that 37% of those who were college educated, whose employers felt that they were not capable of doing the job. Understand that employers also thought 25% of college graduates without a disability couldn't do the job. So there is that concern, and certainly 37% is, a lot. I mean, it's over a third, but recognize that employers are pretty skeptical about a quarter of those with a college degree that come knocking on their door. So it's certainly something that we need to continue to work towards and continue to strengthen rather than to undermine. I mean, part of the civil rights issue, whether it's in employment or in a whole variety of other circumstances, it's been used to divide, and it's been used to identify one against the other, and is losing out in a way that is become fixed and has become, part of how employment is garnered. So I think there is a balance here. I think we're far from, being at a point where we can rescind these things, because I think there have been significant benefits, but it's really tough, especially when it's used as a political football.
What about technology, Jay? We're here interacting in different locations and actually in different office spaces in the same building, yet we still can connect. And so things like remote work, Zoom, all the technology that we have available to us, has this helped in any way?
Yeah, so it's changed everybody's lives, right? Hybrid work, remote work has changed everybody's life. But it just doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, wait a second, for disabled people, that's got to be a huge benefit. And there is some data around this. The American Economic Association in 2026 looked at this question. Does the rise in remote and hybrid work actually help people who are disabled? So there's been a 9 to 11% estimated increase in full-time employment due to remote work. This is for people with disabilities. And for people with disabilities, 68 to 85% of the post-pandemic employment increase is linked to remote work. The study found that each 1 percentage point increase in working from home was associated with a 1% increase, so this is a one-to-one match, in full-time employment. So I think there's evidence of that. My question kind of back to everybody is, with employers pushing now for more full-time back in the office, banks leading the way, that's been a year now in the city anyway, where banks have said you got to be in 5 days a week. Does this roll back some of the things, some of these benefits that have, come out of the increase in remote work. And I don't know, I think, the tech industry was remote before the pandemic in a lot of ways, still is. So it may be more industry specific, but it certainly seems like this is a huge benefit to people with disabilities.
And also the advances in equipment, which targeted specifically for people with disabilities, makes communication even easier or possible in many ways that it wasn't in the past. So I just think it's a question of how do we go from resistance to normalizing the process? And that can be very slow and can have, take a toll on folks along the way.
Lee, before you get to the fun fact, it was not Calvin Coolidge. We looked it up.
What was it?
It was Taft. And it's actually a really good story. So I'm getting this from history.com. But Taft, who, of course, it was 300 pounds, right? This was one of the biggest presidents, right? So he went to a baseball game because he was feeling like he wanted to lighten up his mood. So he went to he had been at this 42nd annual suffragist convention earlier in the day, and it hadn't gone well. This is according to this report. And so he said, you know what, I want to go to a baseball game. He goes to the baseball game to the DC's National Park for a picnic. It was a beautiful spring day, and the Senators were playing the Athletics, who were then in Philadelphia, not in Oakland, because Oakland probably had 20 people in it. It was a sold-out crowd.
And it was the baseball team, the Washington Senators, not the fact that the Senate decided to go and play baseball.
They did not. Anyway, the Senators' manager got the bright idea for Taft to toss out the first ball. And so he was the first one to do that. It wasn't on opening day, though. The tradition is opening day. And FDR was the first to toss out the ball on opening day. And the most famous one, according to this article, and I would agree, is, what was the most famous one after 9/11? Bush. Perfect strike.
Well, of course,
Yes.
of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
All right.
As Derek Jeter said, if you bounce it in, they're going to boo you.
Yeah.
As he will force them.
Yeah, and he made it happen. Anyway, so there you go. I just wanted to, I did a little research during that last segment and found that. Thank you to history.com for filling us in on that. If it's wrong, blame history.com. Okay, Lee.
Well, fun fact, we'll definitely change the tone of this podcast a little bit. And the question, well, it has to do with superstition. And it was asked by Associated Press poll in 2007 of people who had some degree of superstition generally. So it's not like if you don't believe at all in superstition, you didn't make the cut here. But it's a national audience of 1,013 folks. They were basically asked whether they were superstitious about opening an umbrella indoors. And the answer was 23% of these folks said yes, 77% said no. I have no idea how the rest of you feel on this topic. My only concern about opening an umbrella indoors has nothing to do with superstition. I'll walk, under a ladder if I have to. I don't care about these things. But opening an umbrella, you got to watch. You have to have the room, and you got to do it so you don't, injure someone nearby, particularly with some of these large umbrellas.
Or break a chandelier or something like that, right?
Yeah. So I'm clear on this. So I've got all my biases out on the table. But I'm going to go first with our student producers here. AJ, what say you on the superstition and whether you feel like the majority that couldn't care less?
I wouldn't say I'm very superstitious. The one thing I feel like is when something hasn't happened yet and it's like a possibility and you over talk about it, I feel like sometimes it prevents it from actually happening.
Prevent it from happening? Oh, I thought you were going to go the other way and you could say, you tease it, it shows up.
No, I think you need to move silently.
But when you're walking along the sidewalk, do you avoid stepping on the crack?
No.
That's where do you join this Halloweenish kind of question?
I actually have a list on my phone that I prepared for this. And one of them was actually what AJ just said. If something's supposed to happen and I'm talking about it, I will never say, I'm going to do this later. I always say, I'm supposed to do this later. Probably going to do this later. Because there's been too many times where it doesn't end up happening. And so another one that I listed without even knowing the full question was umbrella indoors. I can't do it. It feels like something bad's going to happen. I can't open it indoors.
Have you ever opened an umbrella indoors?
No, but I've been next to Chris while he opened one indoors. I was like, why are you doing that? Why are you opening it indoors? And he was like, nothing's going to happen. I was like, No. You
So I'm
can't
going to
do
guess,
that.
Cassidy, I'm going to guess
Okay.
that you're part of the 43%. And this was a poll of people who are somewhat superstitious. That was only 43% of the population.
Yes.
I'm going to guess you're
Yeah.
part of that 43%
Oh,
who
yeah.
are somewhat superstitious about that. Is that right?
Yes.
There's only a few that I can think of, but the ones that I think of, I definitely do them. Like when I was younger, I would never breathe. I would like hold my breath while passing cemeteries because I thought the bad spirits were
I had
like
heard
get
of that,
sucked
and I
into
did
me.
until cemeteries got so big. I found myself having difficulty doing that. I did that a few times.
But Lee, do you talk about
Yes.
the
It's-
no hitter like in the fifth inning?
Absolutely, and when I was playing baseball, some pitchers and players will jump over the line, and not step
Yeah,
on
I
it.
remember that.
So there's a lot of superstition around. Barb, you're a very
Oh
superstitious
yeah,
person.
I
believe.
would definitely be in the superstitious realm. I mean, I went shopping for pool furniture, and I went into this one establishment, and they had the pool and beach umbrellas open in the
Inside.
inside in the display, to display. And I'm like, I actually asked the salesperson, "Do you really feel comfortable working in here with all these umbrellas open and having to walk under them?" And
That's very funny.
and he kind of gave me a quizzical look as to, okay, I guess the customer is always right.
Did you purchase it there? No.
No, I actually did not end up
Yeah.
buying my pool furniture there, but I would have a tough time opening an umbrella not opening the umbrella. I would open the umbrella in the house, but there's no way I would put it over my head.
Oh, okay. But then there's no use Mary, jump in here. That was an odd answer. Barb also, if you recall last week, likes to read palms during the fun
There's a
fact. So I
pattern
think we have
here. There's a pattern.
Yeah. I'm detecting a pattern. Mary, umbrellas in your house open?
So I never thought of myself as superstitious until I started thinking about this question and going down all the things I won't do. So I won't open an umbrella in the house. In fact, if I see somebody starting to do that, like one of my kids, I'm like, no, stop, you gotta stop. When I cook, I do throw a pinch of salt over my left shoulder.
Wow.
I don't like it when I see a black cat in the street. I sort of stay away so it doesn't cross my path. And I will not walk under a ladder. I will not walk under a ladder, period. So I guess I am
I
quite
guess you're
superstitious.
kind of superstitious. I'm going with. And that,
Why tempt fate?
Jay, I think you're an empiricist. I don't think you're going to jump down to the superstitious side of this thing. I don't think you'll buy it.
Well, it's funny. Mary mentioned that she didn't think of herself as superstitious and still the segment started listing it. And I can't, all the things you've mentioned, I can't list, and none of those. The only one is I do knock on wood sometimes. I'm not sure that's superstition. And I don't really do it because I believe in it. It's just kind of a habit. But I wonder, Lee, have you ever worn a piece of clothing like a hat to a baseball game in a series, or worn your lucky something because you don't want to you want the Yankees to win? Have you ever done?
Oh, with regularity, I think.
So
I'm
that's
not
a
the type-
superstition. So you are.
Yeah, I guess. All
And
right,
how about you,
moving
Jay?
over.
Have you ever, worn a lucky shirt, particular tie when you had a big interview or something? No.
I'm not. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of. I mean, the walking under a ladder. I've heard of the black cat. I've heard of stepping on lines on the sidewalk. I've never heard of. That's that break your mother's back. Step on the crack, break your mother's back. Right. Okay. So I have heard of that. I didn't realize that was superstition. I don't even recognize them as
Jack
superstitions.
Nicholson in the
throw-
movie.
Well, you
What's the
could-
movie that Jack Nicholson doesn't jump? He jumps over the crack in the sidewalk.
It's
also.
as good as it gets.
Good as it
Oh, okay.
gets.
But the salt over the shoulder. I've never heard of that. I've never even heard of that.
Really?
So yeah, no,
about
I
the
guess
clues?
I'm an empiricist, except I knock on wood, and I'm going to do that now in case. There we go. In case I should be superstitious, I don't want to lose out.
Okay, I'm going to go around the room real quickly. I want to know whether you have ever seen or would participate in tossing some quarters in the back seat of a car when someone purchases a new car. Jay, you've heard of that, I assume.
I have not. I thought you were going to say throw coins in the Trevi fountain. I have done that, but I have no idea what you're talking about. Never heard of it.
Okay, well, all right, Mary, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, it's good luck.
It's good luck in the And have you ever done that? Yes. Okay, Cassidy, you know what we're talking about? That's another superstition you can add to your list.
No, I've absolutely never heard of that. I thought you were going to say throw coins in a fountain.
Yeah, no. Barb,
Absolutely.
bail me out before AJ.
Absolutely. And I believe, although I think the amount has gone up. I mean, I
No,
think
inflation will
yeah.
do that. But
Oh,
you would
absolutely.
do
And I
that.
have done it. Yes.
And you would expect someone to reciprocate
Absolutely.
that. Yeah. AJ, I think we're somewhat divided here, and you're going to break the tie.
No, I've not heard of.
I was hoping. I was banking
So
on
Lee, you
No,
can't
but-
break a tie when there's 6 of us here. It's 3-3.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I do find it pretty
Yeah,
interesting. I do find it pretty interesting, though, that in this very empirical-based, science-based organization of public opinion polling,
Yes.
which is very about, empiricism, that
Yes.
that 3 of the 6 of us are pretty superstitious. I find it kind of ironic. How about that?
I don't know.
No, there is a 7th here. Coco's never heard of it either.
Yes, I see. Well, you're not superstitious to have your dog right behind you while you're doing a podcast. So I guess that doesn't rate superstition. Well, folks listening, you've had all kinds of opportunities here to hear things you may or may not have ever considered doing. And I bet like a few of us, when push comes to shove,
Fingers crossed.
there's a little fingers crossed, thank you, that you are superstitious about those things. Yeah. And so that's
Yeah,
the
I do
end
that
of
one
this
too.
week.
I didn't think about fingers crossed. Sure, I do that. Okay.
Let's see. We need to have like a group, like a
Group
superstitious.
therapy, I think, session.
Yeah,
Group therapy session.
a group can do it. Yeah, but anyway, that does wrap it up. And it wouldn't be the end if I didn't say see you next week, because I am superstitious. Take care.
That'll do it for Poll Hub this week.
Poll Hub is produced by the Marist Poll at Marist University in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer.
Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
The Poll Hub team includes AJ Gambino, Tommy Rogers,
Cassie Connors, and Molly Goodger.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, consider telling a friend about us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal accessible from our website.
Remember, you can always tell your smart speaker to play Poll Hub, and with any luck, it'll cooperate.
Finally, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button. Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcasting app as soon as it's released.
We'll see you next time.